Welcome to Accounting in Focus. So today we're going to talk about cost behavior. And in talking about cost behavior, we're going to talk about the components of cost, how we can classify cost into different categories, and then what we can do with them once we have them in those categories. So I want to start off by talking about three types of companies. The first type is manufacturing. Manufacturing companies make stuff. Okay, so they make products. I'll put make stuff. Okay, so these are companies like Ford because they make cars. Um, so when you're thinking about manufacturing companies, they're companies that make things. Dell makes things. Gateway makes things. Um, so that's what you want to think about when you think about manufacturing companies. Retail companies sell stuff. And they sell, so think of like Abercrombie, Walmart, Target. These are companies that sell stuff. This can also be companies that sell things on a wholesale level. So they could be companies that sell stuff to other companies. And service companies are companies that provide a service. So they sell services. And when you think about selling services, you're thinking of law firms, accounting firms, computer repair firms, any company that's going to sell services to other people. Even think of like the cable company sells you services, um, the company that provides your cell phone service, like Verizon or Sprint, they sell services. Okay, so the reason I want to talk about that is because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about manufacturing companies in this chapter. So there are three types of costs when you're making a product. The first one is direct materials. These are the big things that go into making a product. So if you're thinking about making a house, okay, what kind of direct materials do we have? We have lumber, we have windows, we have doors, okay? So these are big things that are easy to measure. In order for it to be a direct material, it has to be easy to measure. Okay, that's why it's called a direct material. Okay, so it has to be easy to measure. Okay, now for direct labor, when you're thinking about building a house, these are the people that are actually building the house. Okay, so another way to think about this is I think of it as touch labor. They have to be literally touching the product in order to be able to make it. Now, your overhead includes everything else. So it includes things like indirect materials. So again, if you're thinking about building a house, that might be nails, glue, okay. Even things like, like paper towels, right? They're things that you're not going to measure. We're not going to count how many nails go into a house or, how many drops of glue we put in different spots. So these are indirect because they're hard to measure. Hard to measure, okay? Now, indirect labor, all the people that don't touch the house while we're building it, but we need them in order to be able to build the house. So these are supervisors. Okay, we might have cleanup people. Okay, people that don't build the house, but we can't build the house without them. We're also thinking about things like rent, depreciation. Okay, costs that are not easy to allocate to the house. Okay, because it's difficult to say, okay, how much of our rent are we going to allocate to each house we're building? How much depreciation are we going to include to each house we're building? So this is harder to allocate, hard to measure. Okay, you could say hard to allocate. Okay, so these are more difficult things to allocate to the job, but if we don't allocate them to the job, then we're not going to figure out the right cost for the job. Okay, non-manufacturing costs. All companies have these. These are selling costs and administrative costs. Selling costs include shipping to the customer, sales commissions, okay, um, advertising, okay, things like that. Shipping to the customer is a selling cost because once we finish making a product, we can't add any more cost to it because then it goes into our inventory. So once the cost is in inventory, you can't add any more cost. The way that I like to think about shipping costs is I can't sell it to my customer if I can't get it to them. Okay, so that's a really good way to think about it. Now, administrative costs are all the costs of keeping the business running. So think about your CEO, your admin staff, okay? If you have a corporate headquarters, all the costs associated with that. Okay, so these are really, the way that I kind of like to think about this, and I can't draw on, I'm writing really horribly with this program, but I kind of like to think that there's a factory building, okay, and that's smoke coming out. That's how we know it's a factory. Okay, and then you have your big, skyscraper corporate headquarters building, right? Lots of windows, the all glass building. We have a lot of these by where I live in Hartford, and we also have a lot in New York City, which isn't too far away. Um, so this is your corporate building. Okay. So what I try to do is I try to ask myself, okay, would these people be working in the factory building or would they be working in the corporate building? So let's think of somebody like the receptionist for the factory. So the receptionist for the factory is clearly working in the factory building. Okay. Now, do they make the product? No, they don't make the product. Right? They answer the phone so that, if we need to get in touch with people who are making the product, we can. Um, so this person would be the factory secretary would be in the factory building, but she would be overhead, okay, because she's not direct labor. There are a couple different ways we can look at costs. We can look at product costs versus period costs. Okay, a product cost is our direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. These are directly related to the product, okay, and therefore these costs go into inventory. You can call these inventory. Okay. Now my period costs. So a period cost is written off in the period in which they're incurred. Okay, so they don't go up into inventory and then wait until we sell them. So that's one way you can break cost up. You can also look at prime cost versus conversion cost. A prime cost is a direct cost. Okay, so that's why you can think of that direct materials and direct labor. Okay, your conversion costs, I think of as the cost to convert your direct materials. Okay, so this would be your direct labor and your overhead. And the reason that we like to break costs up between prime costs and conversion costs is so that we can do planning with them.